So it's not just rainwater that's going into your basement.
Oh, it's not just rainwater. It's sewage. I don't have to spell it out to you, but it's a four-letter word that starts with S.
Basements destroyed, cars submerged, and a subway station drenched. The heavy rains hit the northwest corner of the city hard this morning, leaving all sorts of damage in its wake. Greg Ross joins us live from Coronation Park on the shores of Lake Ontario. And Greg, you witnessed a lot of that damage firsthand today.
I certainly did, Dwight. I'm wondering if I'm going to witness some more damage this evening. I mean, we've got some dark clouds rolling in, raindrops starting to fall here on the shores of Lake Ontario, where the water levels, they've been high all summer, but this water today, this flooding today, not helping. If you look out there, you can see some birds kind of sitting out in the middle of the water there. That's the break wall. That break wall almost completely submerged right now. You can't even see it. That's how high the water is here, and the water level's very high along the 401 at one point this morning as well. I'm talking about the exit ramp from the eastbound lanes of the 401 onto Islington Avenue. This morning, somehow a storm drain got clogged, forcing water levels to rise, and that exit ramp this morning looked more like a pond.
Unable to drive through the flood waters, this car had to be lifted out by heavy tow truck operator Sonny Subra. You literally had to use a winch and pull that car out?
Yeah, literally my truck is a rotator, so I can swing my boom in there and then put a two winch and then strap. Fire department, Toronto Fire Department help us out to put the straps and everything.
This is what the car looked like once it was back on dry land. Subra says it's a hard lesson for the driver who attempted to go through the water.
You got to be some common sense to when you see a water, you stop, and you don't know how deep it is because it's a dirty water and you can't see. It's not a clear water.
The only thing stopping this water from spilling out onto Highway 401 is this barrier. And just to give you an idea of how deep this water is, this barrier is about a meter high and the water is just centimeters from the top.
Oh my God!
Scenes like this played out all over the city. This video was shot by a motorist at the intersection of Jane and St. Clair. This is what it looked like inside the Jane Street subway station as water poured through the ceiling. When you came down here this morning, it was completely flooded.
Yeah, it was completely flooded.
Claudia DeSanto says she and her neighbors on Cordella Avenue had water pour down their driveways, through their garage, and into their basements. So it's not just rainwater that's going into your basement.
Oh, it's not just rainwater. It's sewage. I don't have to spell it out to you, but it's a four-letter word that starts with S. So yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Ricardo Mota says for the second straight year, flooding forced water to pour out of the sewer system near their homes.
This year wasn't as bad as last year, where last year was about 5 feet of sewage in all our basements.
And that man tells me he actually had contractors in his basement working on that damage from last year this morning when the floodwaters hit. And a lot of the work that they had done has been ruined. And he says he's got to get back in touch with his insurance company now and find out where to go from here. And speaking of where to go from here, I'm wondering if I'm going to have to get some shelter. You can see the rain is starting to come down. I wonder if we're going to see more flood problems around the city right now. I should tell you that the Toronto Region Conservation Authority has issued a warning for people to exercise extreme caution around all bodies of water and avoid driving in flooded roadways. So yeah, this is not done yet. Here we go. It's wet again, Dwight. We'll see how long this one holds up.
Great lesson there, motorists. You don't know how deep it is. Don't try to drive through. Thank you for that, Greg. And Colette, you've been keeping an eye on all of this, and you often talk about how localized these things can be because there's other parts of the city that did not get drenched.
Yeah, that's right. This was so localized in terms of the heaviest amounts being there, Dwight, to the west and northwest in the city. And then communities just a little further east where things were dry at the time we were getting pounded into the city. Now, to set the stage for this, I'm taking you back in time a little bit because we had an abundance of moisture available. We had the remnants of Barrie pushing in towards southwestern Ontario, coming in our direction. So I've taken this back, the radar playback, even into yesterday. So that was coming our way. So that's one ingredient. We've got the lift mechanism. We knew we had some humidity, so there's already some moisture in our atmosphere. And as well, we've got the Great Lakes, which provide another moisture source. So now I've got this in slower mo. And we're going back towards the morning hours, and you can see some of the heavier amounts. Let's go in for a closer look. It was really that corridor where we got hit here, again, up between around the 401 towards the 407, but especially near the 401 here and the 427. In that corridor between about 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. this morning. Look at our neighbors here, just a little towards the east, Pickering, Whitby. You were into drier conditions. I'm not saying throughout the whole thing you didn't see some wet conditions, but while this was happening very locally just to the west of you, it's dry over there. And even within the city, some of these lighter greens where you're seeing much lesser amounts and this heavy, heavy stuff that was coming down. And that's why we were talking about in some areas over 90 millimeters in a pretty short period of time there. But the worst of it was really in that about 3 hours that we saw earlier this morning. Now, what I want to show you as well is what's happening currently, and that's this image. So this is no longer a playback, all right? And Greg was just talking about this in his report. Yes, there are a few more cells coming through, so a couple of heavy downpours here towards the city, another one here over towards Mississauga, Oakville, get doused with that. But then behind this, there's actually a clearing trend. So it's not going to be like this morning. It'll be pretty short-lived. Doesn't mean there isn't going to be a heavy downpour there. And boy, that's highly localized with those couple of cells we're seeing there. Temperatures today in terms of we started at 23, 24 by lunchtime, and then not that bad, 26 degrees. It feels like 35 though. This is actually a little more comfortable, and tomorrow will be a little more comfortable compared to where we're going into Friday and Saturday when we're going to get into humidex values in the mid 40s. Just showing you tomorrow looks like mostly sunny into the afternoon hours, but it'll be late overnight into Thursday. We could get into some scattered showers and thunderstorms rolling back in, but we won't see as much as what we saw this morning. Overnight tonight, 20 degrees, 28 tomorrow afternoon, humidity 34. That's good, Dwight. I'll show you where we're going coming up.
Well, lots going on out there weather-wise. Thank you for that, Colette.
No problem.
A man found not criminally responsible for killing his roommate with a meat cleaver has fled the country. Jabin Kong had been under a detention order at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health at Queen and Ossington. Chris Glover is live there for us right now. And Chris, on Monday of this week, police issued a press release to say Kong went missing, but he was already long gone.
The timeline on this one is troubling. On July 3rd, the hospital reported Kong missing to Toronto police. He'd been on an unaccompanied day pass and didn't return to the hospital that evening, but it took Toronto police almost 2 weeks until this Monday to actually notify the public. And tonight we can tell you that on that first day, when he didn't return to the hospital, he was in fact boarding an international flight. When Jabin Kong killed his roommate with a meat cleaver in 2014, he suffered from schizophrenia and was off his medication. Court documents show he was found to be incapable of knowing what he was doing was wrong and therefore was not criminally responsible for the killing. Since then, he's been under a detention order living in the forensic unit of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, known as CAMH. On July 3rd, while on an unaccompanied day pass, he never returned. The hospital says he was reported missing to police that evening, but it took nearly 2 weeks for the public to be notified of his disappearance. Police won't comment on the case, but we know Kong boarded an international flight on the same day he was reported missing by the hospital. He had repeatedly told authorities he wanted to return to China to be with his mother.
If they knew 2 weeks ago, then arguably the way the system should work is the word should go out.
This former member of Canada's parole board says even killers found not criminally responsible are allowed day passes, but he thinks institutions like CAMH have too much discretion.
CAMH has moved quickly on removing some of the restrictions that existed for Mr. Kong.
So in your opinion, do you think that they have been too lenient on patients like him?
They work in a clinical model all the time, and in my experience, that results in people returning to the community. Certainly some people, not all NCR offenders, but certainly many of them returning to the community in very quick order.
Last year, Kong was approved to live in the community under 24-hour supervision. In his most recent detention review, May of this year, it says he continues to pose a significant threat to public safety. The major fear was, without hospital oversight, he'd stop taking medication and slip back into seriously harmful criminal conduct. Despite that, the 2019 decision removed the 24-hour supervision stipulation in the community. Today, Toronto's mayor called for answers and transparency, but the hospital at the center of his detention isn't taking questions from the media, instead releasing a statement to announce an internal investigation into the rare incident is underway. And in light of all of this, the physician in charge is now going through all of the patient passes and privileges and reassessing that. And in the forensic unit, I'm told that they have increased security and new clinicians added to the unit to try to keep everything safer. And I should also tell you, Dwight, that there have been 4 other disappearances from this area in just the past month. Now, when I asked Toronto Police about where those missing persons cases originated, they would only say Queen and Ossington. They wouldn't necessarily say that they were patients of the hospital as well.
Chris, I think a lot of people are wondering why Kong then wasn't flagged as he was trying to get on a plane and board an international flight.
Technically, he's not a criminal, he's a patient, so he wouldn't be on any red flag list. And in Canada, we don't track the departures, or we haven't up until now. Land departures or land borders are now starting to collect and track people leaving the country, and they're going to start doing that at air borders as well, starting next summer, Dwight.
Yes. A Toronto man who lost his entire family in the Ethiopian Airlines plane crash earlier this year spoke in front of a U.S. congressional subcommittee today. It's investigating 2 disasters involving the Boeing 737 MAX jet. Now, last October, a Lion Air flight crashed into the Java Sea. Shortly after leaving Indonesia, 189 passengers and crew were killed. 4 months later, 157 people died when an Ethiopia Airlines plane crashed just minutes after takeoff. Paul Jaroga lost his wife, 3 children, and mother-in-law in that crash.
Think about the last 6 minutes a lot. My wife and my mom-in-law knew they were going to die. They had to somehow comfort the children during those final moments, knowing they were all their last. I wish I was there with them. It never leaves me that my family's flesh is there in Ethiopia, mixed with the soil, the jet fuel, and pieces of the aircraft. In Canada, Independence Day was celebrated on July 1st. I stayed buried in my little house in my grief, hearing the sounds of celebration and fireworks in the sky. But all I could think about was the 737 MAX struggling to gain height and eventually dive into the ground. If my wife, my children, and my mom-in-law were alive, they would have enjoyed all family activities on Canada Day. Every minute of every day, they would be all around me, full of life and health. I miss them every minute of every day.
Jaroga described Boeing's actions in the wake of the crash as shameful and disrespectful, saying the company blamed foreign pilots instead of its own design flaws. Investigators believe a faulty sensor forced the plane into a dive and pilots were unable to correct the problem. Police have already charged 6 people in connection with the armed jewelry store robbery you're looking at, including 1 suspect taken down at the scene. They are now looking for 4 others in the December 30th heist at the Lookfook jewelry store in Markville Mall. The suspects wore construction vests, carried guns and hammers, and stole a large amount of jewelry. Investigators say they also left a suspicious package at the Markham GO station before the robbery in an attempt to tie up police resources. Now, contact York Regional Police if you recognize any of these suspects still on the loose. 9 dogs died overnight in a kennel fire in King Township. The flames broke out at the North Toronto Canine Centre and burned itself out. Employees only realized what happened when they got in around 8:30 this morning. Police are not treating the fire as criminal at this point, but no cause has been determined. Asleep at the wheel with an open bottle of rum and cannabis inside the car. A driver passed out at an intersection just north of Toronto, and he's been charged with impaired driving, and it was all caught on video.
I got a car sitting at a stop sign. Buddy's passed right out. There's a blind intersection too. I'm just scared he's going to get off the brake or something and fly out the intersection.
You clearly had something. I can smell it in your breath. Okay, get out of the car. Okay, put your hands on your back.
York Regional Police were called to the intersection in the township of King around 6 a.m. on Sunday. Officers said it took numerous attempts to get the 19-year-old just to open his eyes. The man was arrested, and officers later found an open bottle of rum and weed in his car. He is now facing several charges. Health Minister Christine Elliott was on the fire again over a promise made by Premier Doug Ford that his government would end hallway health care in a year.
Yes, I believe that we have the plan in place to eliminate hallway health care. I can't tell you exactly within what time frame. Certainly we hope within a year, but there are other factors that will come up that will be beyond our control, like the upcoming flu season, as I've mentioned before.
The health minister was announcing the addition of 40 beds at a facility meant to transition patients from hospital to home. Ford made his pledge last week during a meeting of Canada's premiers. Elliott already walked Ford's comments back on Monday, saying he was just articulating the government's wishes. The Ontario Council of Hospital Unions calls Ford's comments magical thinking, and opposition leader Andrew Horwath said he pulled the year-long timeline out of thin air. A plea to politicians today to change the provincial organ donor policy. A longtime activist who's had 2 transplants and needs another wants everyone to be considered an organ donor unless they opt out. Lorinda Redekop has more on whether this could actually happen.
Basically, that's what's keeping me alive. Thank God for dialysis, or I truly would be dead.
George Marcello gets kidney dialysis 3 times a week. He's already had 2 transplants for his liver. Now he needs a new kidney.
How many pills do you think you take a day?
Well, about 13.
He says the anti-rejection drugs he needs weakened his system. 20 years ago, after his first transplant, he walked across Canada to raise awareness about organ donations. His latest fight is to make organ donation an opt-out system instead of opting in. Every 3 days in Ontario, someone dies waiting for an organ.
The soft opt bill alone won't solve it, but it'll make a big difference.
Today, he pleaded his case at Queen's Park.
I know I don't have that much time left to live unless I receive a kidney transplant. Whatever time I have left, I'm going to devote it to trying to get meetings with the PC government.
He was joined by an NDP MPP. She tried unsuccessfully to pass a similar bill and isn't giving up.
85% of Ontarians want to be donor, but only 34% opt in.
The health minister panned the idea.
There are a lot of risks associated with that, including family members that might disagree with somebody's request, lawsuits that could happen.
This is in place in some other countries and in Nova Scotia.
We haven't seen any lawsuits. There's no body of evidence to support what she's saying.
The Trillium Gift of Life Network says internationally there's no evidence an opt-out system increases donor numbers. Family consent is still required. It instead encourages people to register to become a donor.
And the rest of the world.
George Marcello says an opt-out system is the answer, and for people to talk to their family.
The chances of me getting that kidney would soar.
Lorinda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Doug Ford's office says too many special interest groups have been calling the Premier's cell phone, something the Premier has asked people to do.
Making sure that we take care of the grassroots people, and they don't need access to Doug Ford. They call me on my cell phone. I get hundreds of calls a day. I return their phone calls.
Ford was forced to cancel his cell phone because of all the calls. The Premier has been giving out his cell phone number for months now, touting it as a way for Ontarians to directly connect with him. But his office says certain groups launched coordinated calls in recent weeks that made the phone impossible to use. The Premier's office says people can still contact Ford through his official email and office phone number.
This has been my deepest desire. With great support, this was built last year. Everything is in place, it's just the fine-tuning, and it so happened that it just came exactly in time.
A Toronto woman built her own observatory, and as she said, it's done just in time for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, coming up her personal connection to that historic moment.
I never dreamed once that I would have the fortune of holding a bit of this magic moon.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The Washington Monument has been transformed in honor of the historic moon landing 50 years ago. An image projected on the facade turned the towering structure into the 363-foot-tall rocket. The spacecraft with the Apollo 11 crew landed on the moon in 1969. That's where the American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to set foot on the lunar surface. NASA is aiming to send humans back to the moon in 5 years. Apollo 11 celebrations continue to Saturday. Now, 50 years ago, she held a piece of the moon in her hands, and now this Toronto woman built an observatory at her cottage. We spoke to the space enthusiast half a century after the moon landing.
What should I title you as? Like space enthusiast or?
Yeah, enthusiast. I love what you just said.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is. I'm crazy. I'm a curious person of deep space. When I was a little girl, I spent a lot of time with my grandma in a little village called Gorai, which is off Bombay, which is today's Mumbai. There was no electricity over there. The air was fresh, the word pollution wasn't heard, and the night sky was so clear that the stars glittered like diamonds. But I never dreamed once that I would have the fortune of holding a bit of this magic moon. October 26, 1969, the astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were to visit, and it was a huge success. My boss gave me the biggest surprise. The next thing I knew, he handed over to me the moon rock to hold. And he took a photograph. I was so amazed because that little piece of rock just dazzled under the sun. This has been my deepest desire with great support. This was built last year. Everything is in place, it's just the fine tuning. And it so happened that it just came exactly in time. The telescope is 1.5 times my size. The weight, enormous. We need 3-4 people. Actually, it was a struggle building the observatory. We had to put a 17 solid steel pipe, cutting right down to be sure it's on rock, and filled with 3,000 pounds of cement. My favorite constellation is Orion. You see this big misty cloud. That cloud is the birthplace, like a maternity ward for stars. It's of gas and dust and fire, like it exudes out, and I can look at it every night. There's so much out over there, and there's so much happiness. We've got so much to learn and know about, and respect nature and its environment. So for me, that's priority in my life.
2, 1, 0.
Lift off. It's an Indian rocket, but the tech on board is from downtown Toronto. Still ahead, we look at the rapidly changing, out-of-this-world business of space. But first, back on Earth.
So do your job, animate the sidewalks, have development that has great retail along the streets.
You know, he said do your job. He's inferring that I'm not doing my job. I'd ask for an apology.
Okay, exactly. And that's what exactly.
The Empress Flare at Toronto City Council, why one councillor was asked to apologize for his remarks or leave. Coming up after the break. Public consultations continue tonight about the smart city that's being planned for our waterfront. We're talking, of course, about the Sidewalk Labs development. Ali Chiasson is live at the Radisson Admiral Hotel for us this evening. And Ali, the city's hoping to hear from the public about Google moving in.
That's right. So right now I'm standing out front of the boardroom at the Radisson Hotel, where about 250 members of the public are discussing Quayside. Now, that is the community that's being billed as this smart city that will eventually exist on sustainable energy and be built with high-tech integrated infrastructure. And it's all planned for 5 acres of Toronto's waterfront. It has recently drawn some criticism from the public, specifically who are concerned about data collection, the data collection that may just have to come with having Google as a neighbor. Quayside is the brainchild of Sidewalk Labs, which is a subsidiary of Alphabet, which is Google's parent company. Now, it's Waterfront Toronto that's hosting tonight's consultation, and I spoke to a representative about how the data collection is being addressed tonight. Have a listen.
We're going to give an overview of the actual Master Innovation and Development Plan, which is the proposal we've received from Sidewalk Labs that we will then evaluate after we've consulted the public. We'll give an overview of what's in the proposal. We'll highlight a couple of areas that we have questions and concerns, and we will be sharing those with the groups. And then there'll be working tables on that particular topic, and we have specialists at each table to help with the conversation and then report back. So what we're really trying to get from people tonight is what are they thinking about?
So the Sidewalk Labs proposal is 1,500 pages long. What does that look like? That looks like about 4 of these heavy books. So there's definitely a lot to go through. That is why the members of the community here will be breaking off into smaller groups to go over certain topics. Tonight is all about getting feedback, and Toronto's Mayor John Tory will also be here. He's in there right now to give his feedback as well and participate here. I'll send it back to you for now, Dwight.
Happy reading, Ali. Thank you. Councillors went to bat for bike lanes at today's meeting, voting overwhelmingly to study an expansion of our bike lane network, though there was some opposition.
Is there a requirement that there has to be a certain capacity on a road to warrant consideration for a bike lane?
Through the Speaker, we do not require a certain threshold of cycling volume be met in order to add a cycling facility on a roadway.
Do you think that's a good idea?
I do, because I think that typically latent demand is significant. When you build a cycling facility, you will almost always see a huge uptick in the number of users.
The new cycling network plan is looking to build more than 100 kilometers of new infrastructure over the next 3 years, including a pilot project for protected bike lanes on Danforth Avenue and an extension of the Bloor bike lanes to High Park. Now, before decisions were made and votes tabulated, the debate over bike lanes got heated this morning between councillors Josh Matlow and Denzel Minan Wong, ending with one of them being told to leave the council chambers. Take a listen.
Are you aware that there are streets where there's that there's virtually no pedestrian traffic?
So do your job, animate the sidewalks, have development that has great retail along the streets, have safe sidewalks, public realm, great bike lanes, and then we make a vibrant city and correct the mistakes of poor planning in some of our suburban areas.
Councillor Matlow, please. The councillor is asking you a question.
No, he said do your job. He's inferring that I'm not doing my job. I'd ask for an apology.
Okay, exactly, and that's exactly what I was going to do.
Please have...
That's exactly what I was going to do. Councillor Matlow, could you please apologize and retract that comment, please?
I won't apologize, but I'll retract it. It would be dishonest because I wouldn't believe it. Like I do retract it to avoid this debate, but I actually don't believe that he's doing his job as a representative that should focus.
Madam Chair.
Okay, councillor.
I just don't. I'm just being sincere with you.
Councillor Matlow, you're going a little too far. Now I'm asking you to apologize. Or I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you don't apologize.
I can't do it with sincerity. So you'll have to do what you have to do, and I respect that, but I can't.
And with that, Councillor Matlow left. He would return less than an hour later, though, and apologize, only, he said, so he could vote on the issue. Bike share riders will now have an easier time looking for a bike in our city as Google launches an update that allows users to see how many bikes are at a given station in real time. You can find this right in your Google Maps app. The app will also show if there's any empty space near you, so you can dock the bike when you're done. And we were talking about all the flooding, and as soon as we finished talking, we went to Chris Glover, who was live outside with an umbrella, and that rain is continuing today, Colette.
Yeah, it is. We have one cell that's kind of left on our radar in the Oakville area, and I'll show you that highly localized now. That's where it's located, though, at the moment, and I'll show you on the radar in a second. I want to kind of go over the headlines, though, for you in terms of what you can expect in the short term. So overnight tonight, some areas with some reduced visibility, patchy fog. A reasonable day, I'll call it reasonable tomorrow in terms of the temperatures and humidity, just because compared to Friday and Saturday, it's going to seem reasonable. That's when we're going to see the spike in our temperatures and in the dew point and the moisture that's in the air and how sticky it's going to be. Current temperature is 26. The Humidex is 36. I want you to remember that, okay? So just remember, Humidex mid-30s. I'm going to show you something in a moment, and that's going to come into play. But I can show you what Dwight was just referring to. Current radar imagery. This is just a bit of Virgo, don't mind that. Those cells that pass through, we saw some of our reporters getting wet, but all that's left now that's active is this cell here, and it is weakening, also heading out into the water there around Oakville. So I know you're getting doused there, but elsewhere we're looking at that drying trend and just a bit of that fog development. Tomorrow, primarily a dry day as well, with some sunshine, especially into the afternoon hours, but late day into cottage country, some scattered showers and thunderstorms back towards southwestern Ontario developing. So overnight Thursday, we may get some coming through the GTA. In fact, I think we will. Not a lot, but still some precipitation rolling through. Friday, again, into the evening hours, scattered showers, thunderstorms developing once again, some of that convection, because there's going to be a lot of moisture in the air and just a little bit of lift, and we get into some afternoon thunderstorms. Very typical summertime kind of activity. Overnight tonight, again, a few areas could see that reduced visibility, 19 to 21 for the overnight lows. Tomorrow, comfortable compared to Friday, Saturday, with highs there in the 20s. Remember, I said, remember that mid-30s for your Humidex? That's some discomfort, what you're feeling out there. When we get to Friday and Saturday, look at 40 to 45, great discomfort, avoid exertion, and that's the territory we're going into for Friday and Saturday. It only takes 2 days, consecutive days at least, with those kinds of conditions, when then we see Environment Canada putting out a heat warning. So I suspect they will be putting one out at some point tomorrow for what's coming Friday and Saturday, because those are some dangerous conditions, Dwight, when we're talking about the humidity there and that Humidex in the mid-40s.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The World Health Organization has declared an international emergency over Ebola. The disease has killed nearly 1,700 people in the past year, almost all of them in rural areas of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But now the virus has shown up in a big city, and health officials are worried it could start to spread even more quickly. Eric Stoffel explains.
As word that Ebola has now spread to the city of Goma, people are scrambling to protect themselves from the virus. I'm shaken and scared, this man says. That's why I won't stop washing my hands. This outbreak first took hold in more rural parts of eastern Congo. Dozens of new cases reported every day. But now there are worries that this wave of Ebola will intensify, as the virus is now present in Goma, a major urban area.
Goma is an extremely busy, crowded town. It's super difficult to control this.
Containing the outbreak in Congo has been difficult. Not only are some parts of the country remote and hard for medical workers to get to, Ebola is spreading in an area consumed by ethnic violence, which has forced hundreds of thousands from their homes. Medical experts from the World Health Organization gathered in Geneva today, declaring an international public health emergency.
What does that mean? This is still a regional emergency and by no way a global threat.
The WHO's declaration is meant to focus international attention on the Congo outbreak. It's also a call for more funding from countries around the world so more doctors, nurses, and supplies can be sent in. And it comes just as medical workers began vaccinating people, including children, in Goma. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, London.
There was no escaping a mandatory life sentence without parole for Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in a Brooklyn courtroom today. But the prosecution and defense don't see eye to eye on how the case against the notorious Mexican drug kingpin unfolded.
The long road that led Chapo Guzman from the mountains of Sinaloa to the courthouse behind us today was paved with death, drugs, and destruction. But it ended today with justice.
He said to me from day one, I just want a fair trial. You tell me that I can get justice here, it was not justice.
Mexico, Guzman and his drug trafficking empire were protected by gangsters and an elaborate corruption operation. He was sentenced in Mexico and twice escaped prison there before being brought to the U.S. to stand trial. That history fueled his image as a slippery and ruthless criminal who could bribe or tunnel or even kill his way out of trouble. Guzman was convicted in the U.S. in February. In addition to his prison sentence, he's been ordered to forfeit more than $12 billion his cartel took in distributing drugs in the U.S. His lawyer maintains Guzman was framed by other traffickers, and they plan to appeal. Prosecutors have dropped their indecent assault case against actor Kevin Spacey. Spacey was accused of getting an 18-year-old man drunk and then groping him at a Massachusetts bar in 2016, where the teen worked as a busboy. Spacey denied the allegations. The case was hobbled after Spacey's accuser took the fifth and refused to testify about text messages the defense claims were deleted. The accuser had been ordered to testify about a cell phone he used the night of the alleged assault. He was supposed to turn it over to the defense, but said it was missing. Federal Conservatives are changing a fundraising ad after concerns were raised by the family of a Canadian man detained in China. The ad challenged the Trudeau government's record on foreign relations. Catherine Tunney has the story.
The video starts as your average election year ad, with the Conservatives trying to nail Justin Trudeau's foreign policy record so far, including rising diplomatic tensions with China. Now, in the video, it shows the two Canadian men who have been detained since December, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and tries to blast Trudeau's inability to free them. Last week, the Conservatives were defending this ad and then the inclusion of the two men in the video. And this week, they've had to change their tune. Today, the Conservative Party put out a statement saying that one of the families asked them to remove the photo and the name from the video. Here's what Conservative leader Andrew Scheer had to say today.
Well, once we heard from the family members, obviously we want to respect that. That family is going through an awful lot right now, and I can only imagine the type of anxiety that they would be feeling about a loved one who's being held. So, you know, as soon as we heard from them that this is something that they would prefer, we absolutely respect those wishes.
Now, when CBC asked Michael Kovrig's sister about what she thought about her brother's use in this fundraising video, she said today that it's, quote, no longer an issue, referring to the fact that the video has been taken down so far, and isn't going to comment any further on it. Now, the Liberals are commenting. They put out a statement which reads that it is disappointing that the Conservatives would try to use this difficult situation for partisan political purposes. Our government's priority is the welfare of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who have been arbitrarily detained. Now, a Conservative spokesperson says that they plan on recutting the video without the men's images. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
Space, the final frontier for business. After the break, we look at the Canadian entrepreneurs already making their mark in a skyrocketing industry. Stay with us. We will be right back. On this date in 1969, the Apollo 11 astronauts were rocketing their way to the moon to win the space race. 50 years later, the competition is all about profit. Space travel is turning into a trillion-dollar industry, and as Aaron Saltzman explains, Canadian companies are playing an essential part.
2, 1, 0.
Liftoff. It's an Indian rocket, but part of the payload comes from a company in downtown Toronto.
We're a space business, and what we do is we design, build, launch small satellites for communications.
Their satellites are about the size of a loaf of bread. Within 3 years, they expect to have 140 of them orbiting Earth, moving massive amounts of data quickly, even in the most remote regions of the planet.
We're building up connectivity for places here on Earth and for connectivity for places outside Earth in the future.
50 years after Apollo 11, today's space race is a for-profit enterprise. Since the turn of the century, the number of privately funded space companies around the world has grown nearly 14-fold. Together, they've raised nearly $19 billion in private capital. It's been dubbed the entrepreneurial space race, with celebrity billionaires backing space tourism and building reusable rockets, racing to grab a piece of a space economy that could one day be worth more than $1 trillion US per year. Experts say Canada has been a little slower off the mark than the US and Europe.
But now it is starting to ramp up.
It's Canada's high-tech expertise, she says, that is driving much of the growth.
Robotics, communications, Earth observation, and these areas we can demonstrate globally that we are leaders.
North Star, the first commercial platform to deliver high-fidelity space situational awareness services from space.
Montreal-based North Star is creating a hyper-accurate system of space-based sensors to monitor Earth's orbit and the tens of millions of bits of space junk flying around the planet. It's kind of an extraterrestrial version of an air traffic control system, needed now more than ever.
You're not going to have a $1 trillion space economy and commercialize space if everybody's worried that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that my satellite's going to get knocked out of space by a piece of debris moving at 15 kilometers a second.
2.
Outer space, now a commercial space. And it's only going to skyrocket from here. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Montreal.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX was down by over 18 points. The Dow Jones was also down by 115, and the Canadian dollar traded for an average of 76.61 cents US. We'll be right back. A boy with terminal brain cancer could have wished to see Disneyland. Instead, he chose a much shorter trip from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland to throw someone else a birthday party. Katie Breen has the story.
9-year-old Leland Hill loves dogs, but he didn't come all the way from Nova Scotia just for puppies. 2 years ago, he missed his great-grandmother's 90th birthday party, and he hasn't let his parents forget it. When he found out his cancer was back and he could make a wish, he wished to come to Newfoundland to throw another party for his great nanny Thorn.
When he said that, our hearts kind of sank. Like, we couldn't believe it because it wasn't about him, it was about somebody else, and this is supposed to be about him, right?
The party was Saturday, and it was the first time the two ever met.
When he went and gave her that hug, everybody just teared up. It was just joy.
The hug of a lifetime, you know. She's seen many pictures of him on Facebook, but never ever got a chance to actually put her arms around and give him a big hug and, you know, and all that. So the party was great.
She was fun to me because, well, she was old. So my best time to meet her was now.
Today's puppy party is an added bonus. People here heard about Leland's trip and wanted to watch him meet his great-grandma. Mom and Dad wanted to keep it a family event, so Make-A-Wish threw this party so everyone and their dogs could come say hi to Leland. It's a happy day for a boy facing a difficult disease.
He does have his moments, so you know we'll be laying down at night sometimes, and he'll say to us, you know, why do I have to get cancer again? Why me? You know, I don't want to die. I want you guys to get me a cure. You know, I want to beat this. And to hear that and to try to speak to him about that is so tough.
Doctors say there's little they can do about Leland's cancer. Surgeries are too dangerous. Treatments wouldn't give him a good quality of life. So they told his parents to give him the best summer they could. And this trip is just the start.
Yep, best summer ever.
Katie Breen, CBC News, St. John's.
Hi, this is Tenzin, and we're reporting from CBC News.
Hello, my name is Andrew, and I'm working at CBC.
So we're watching CBC Toronto News, and we'll be right back.
It was a special day here at CBC headquarters. CBC Kids Days took over our atrium, and one of my favorite parts of the event is the Junior Journalist Contest. Young reporters took their best crack at taking my job. Take a look at these future CBC reporters.
This is one of my dreams to be talking to you. This is Quentin, and I'm reporting for CBC Kids.
This is Evan from CBC.
Could you say hi, Mom? Hi, Mom. No?
Hi, Mom. What's the hardest part of your job?
Oh, my goodness. That is a really good question. How old are you?
4.5, but almost 5.
You're almost 5. That's why you're so intelligent.
My name is Andrew, and I'm working at CBC.
I like the way you say CBC.
And
you have fun.
And I'm doing the news in Toronto.
He's ready. Is that your favorite color?
Yeah.
It's your favorite color? And how old are you?
3.
And you're watching CBC News.
And I'm watching CBC News.
Ha-ha! You're a star. Listen, Adriana, you've already got the anchor person pose. Your arms are, your back is straight, your shoulders are up, and you look like you're ready to do the news. Are you ready to do the news?
Today at CBC Kids, I got a tattoo outside. It's a picture of a whale tail. It's right here.
A little show and tell. That's good reporting. Yeah. Talk about it and show it. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. And I also watched a little puppet show at a stage over there, and it was really fun. And I also got to dance and play with my parents.
You are ready to report. That was pretty good. Do you like TV?
Yes.
Do you watch the news once in a while?
Yes.
Okay.
Colette, is it going to be hot outside again?
That was a question from a lot of the kids. They were so cute. I had so much fun with them.
Oh, my gosh.
It will be Matt Galloway's turn tomorrow at 10 a.m., so you can still come down and have some fun. And then they'll probably play some of that on Metro Morning. But she wants to know if it's going to be hot again. 20 seconds to tell her.
Okay, well, it's going to be hot again tomorrow, but nothing like it's going to be Friday and Saturday.
That's right.
And can I just say one thing, echoing that one boy's sentiment? Dwight, it's my dream to be talking to you.
Funny. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all the kids who came down and had fun at CBC Kids Day with us today.